Good morning, rise and shine to the morning momentum, your daily dose of a comprehensive rundown of the top stories making the headlines, today being Wednesday, 10th July 2024. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines. We start with the Standard, the Gen Z backlash. Now, President William Ruto must have thought signing the IEBC amendment bill at KICC and with the opposition present will placate the protesters. It angered them more. The youth feel those present are the face of what they are fighting, and even the children of the leaders scorned at them. The presence of military guarding the ceremony made matters worse. That story is beefed up for you on page 5, and we have different reactions from Kenyans in as far as this is concerned. Let's take a look at a few. Cornelius Rono said, the dialogue is between two individuals, William Ruto and Raila Odinga. We refuse to be controlled by selfish politicians who only value their stomachs. Gen Zs and millennials are taking the bull by the horns. Duke Mtambo says political class regrouping to secure their selfish interests through an opposition handshake. But what we want to tell Raila Odinga is that those harmless youths didn't die on the streets for senseless dialogues. Raila, who are we? You are not our leader. More of those sentiments are still beefed up for you on the front page of the Standard this morning. 6 days, President announced, will be for dialogue through the National Multisectoral Forum. Also, as radical changes to IEBC expected to follow soon. In-tray versus new laws. So let's take a look at this. In-tray. The signing into law by President William Ruto has kickstarted the rigorous process of appointing new commissioners. It will be instrumental in ending the plight of voters in Banisa constituency and several wards that have to go a by-election. It will also commence the boundaries delimitation exercise that was supposed to have been concluded by March 2024. On the other side, the new laws, number one, the vice chairperson of the commission will not automatically become the chairperson whenever a vacancy occurs. Number two, IEBC commissioners must have 10 years experience in their areas of study with IT as one of the key fields. And number three, the chairperson of the commission shall be a person who is qualified to hold the office of Judge of the Supreme Court. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 6 and page 7 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 2. Murkomen shows off on social media video show. Now, Kenyans were stunned when Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen revealed some of the most expensive items he owns. A watch worth 900,000 shillings, a belt worth 40,000 shillings and 50,000 shillings, shoes valued at 70,000 to 80,000 shillings, and his ties cost him something small. Listen to this, one at 20,000 Kenya shillings. More of that is beefed up for you on page 2. Also on page 2, missing JKUAT student drowned, autopsy shows. Now, Omondi's body was discovered on July 6th in Mashinani quarries in Juja. He was seen protesting at the National Assembly on June 25th, and he disappeared on June 27th. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On page 3, ex-husband seeks half of running champion Kabu's 10 million shillings estate. Man says he resigned from police job to coach Kabu. And strange wife claims he was dishonest in marriage. That story is beefed up for you on page 3 of the Standard this morning. Let's move on swiftly and take a look at page 4. Ruto public show as he sets the ball rolling for recall of errant leaders. Now, Kenyans have threatened to send some lawmakers home. IEBC selection panel now has 9 members, up from 7. You want to catch up with that story on page 4 of the Standard this morning. On page 5, backlash. Ruto's approach fails to ease heat against the government. Gen Z flocked to social media dismissing any proposal of a dialogue. They accused the political elite of trying to hijack their leaderless initiative. You want to catch up with that story on page 5 of the Standard this morning. On page 6, Ruto assents to bill paving the way for radical changes to IEBC. Now, law provides that IEBC vice chairperson will not automatically become the chairperson. Only parties with more than 17 MPs may nominate a representative to the selection panel. You want to catch up with that story on page 6 of the Standard this morning, and on page 7, Road to 2027. The president kicks off rigorous task to pick IEBC bosses. The current IEBC selection panel is now dissolved, and Ruto has 14 days to name a new team. The panel will in turn facilitate the appointment of the IEBC chair and commissioners. That story is beefed up for you on page 7 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 8. A night of resolve. Medical interns stage vigil at Health Ministry. They aimed to pressure authorities to honor 2017 CBA. Members of the public provided food, coffee, and beddings. That story is beefed up for you on page 8 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 9. Pressure piles on Ruto to sack IG Kome over police brutality. The state has employed a tactic of denial atrocities, thus shielding officers. Since his appointment in 2022, IG Kome has attracted criticism, and that story is beefed up for you on page 9. Let's take a look at page 10. Foreigners ordered to surrender freehold titles to Lands Ministry. Now, Wahome says policy does not allow non-Kenyans to have freehold land papers. A person who is not a citizen may hold land on the basis of leasehold tenure only. That story is covered on page 10 of the Standard this morning. On page 11, Obado's list of assets found in bedrooms. The properties were registered in his name, close relatives, and aides. Anti-graft officer said the list of assets from the bulk of the 505 million shillings corruption. You have the comprehensive cover of that story on page 11 of the Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the expert opinion. Government must stop cavalier approach to disputes with staff. The Constitution in Chapter 5 under the Bill of Rights dwell on, among others, labor relations. In Article 41, it provides that every person has a right to fair labor practices. For clarity, the document further goes ahead to bring to our attention what it envisages to constitute fair labor practices. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. On page 13, should senator and governor positions be abolished? Sheikh Anas Abdallah, Imam Jamia Mosque, says no, Kenyans are better off with devolution. And Rose Mukonyo, a journalist, also supports this sentiment, says new push is diversionary and unlawful. That story is beefed up for you on page 13. Let's move on and take a look at some county news on the Standard this morning. 40 Kericho MCS approved motion to impeach County Secretary Bor. They allege Dr. Wesley Bor is incompetent and has violated sections of the Leadership and Integrity Act. The Assembly, however, resolved to establish a special committee to investigate the allegations. That story is beefed up for you on page 16. Let's take a look at West Pokot County. Man forced to hang his father over witchcraft claims. Now, police in West Pokot County have launched investigations into an incident where villagers reportedly forced a man to kill his father by hanging over allegations of witchcraft. The police are now hunting for suspects who participated in the incident that occurred on Sunday at Katikimor village in Kapenguria sub-county. Also, youth stormed Nandi Governor's office to demand accountability. Hundreds of youths stormed Nandi Governor Stephen Sang's office to demand accountability for projects. They raised concern over alleged delayed implementation of projects, irregularities in employment of county staff, and discrepancies in expenditure of public funds. That story is beefed up for you on page 16 of the Standard this morning. Let's move on to page 17. Guardians of Forest, how the Ogiek blend tradition and tech in conservation. The indigenous community is tracking and monitoring wildlife within specific areas. They use special applications installed in mobile phones to take pictures of wildlife footsteps and identify them. You want to catch up with that story on page 17. Let's take a look at Kajiado County. 1 killed, scores admitted with injuries after train derails. Now, 1 person died while scores were injured after a passenger train derailed in Kajiado during the accident that occurred at Nduka Moja Bridge in Ludakilani Ward. 66 passengers were admitted to the Kajiado County Referral Hospital. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. Let's take a look at business news. More debt pain for Kenyans after latest Moody's credit downgrade. Global rating agencies' negative rating means the country will pay more to borrow domestically and internationally. The downgrade follows the rejection of Finance Bill 2024, which has left a gaping financing gap. That story is augmented for you on page 18. Let's take a look at the tech field. ISP bets on new techs to grow market share. Internet solutions provider Vilcom Network is looking to leverage emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence to expand its reach across Kenya. In the banking sector, Kingdom Bank expands into Meru. Kingdom Bank, a subsidiary of the Cooperative Bank of Kenya, has opened its 22nd branch in Meru County. This is the lender's 3rd new location this year as part of an ongoing expansion to serve the region's agricultural community and small to medium enterprises, SMEs. You want to catch up with that story on page 18. Now, with that story of Kingdom Bank, we take a look at the international news. Now, less is more. Trump not talking much as Joe Biden flounders. Trump's rally in Doral, Florida on Tuesday will be his first public event in 11 days. Trump has passed up opportunities for his share for the limelight. You want to catch up with that story on page 21 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 22. Modi, Putin hold talks amid outrage over Ukraine strikes. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was set to hold talks with President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday, a day after the Indian leader arrived in Moscow amid global outcry over Russian strikes in Ukraine. That story is covered on page 22 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at sports news now. And to start us off in the world of sports, Yusufi out to represent stolen dreams of Afghan women in Paris. The 100-meter sprinter was Afghanistan's flag bearer at the Tokyo Games. She fled her home country to Iran to escape persecution when the Taliban returned to power in August 2021. In matters football, Gor Mahia backed to win Kagame Cup. The Council of East and Central Africa Football Association's CECAFA Kagame Cup kicked off in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania on Tuesday with 12 teams in contention for the total 7.6 million shillings prize money on offer. One of the sides tripped to lift the trophy are recorded Kenyan champions Gor Mahia. In matters athletics, why Gathimba is going for Olympic glory. Kenyan race walking veteran Samuel Gathimba believes he has what it takes to win a medal at the 2024 Paris Olympic Games slated for July 26th to 11th August in France. The 2019 African champion will set his foot on the streets on the morning of August 1st as he aims to leave a mark on the games. On page 30, who will jump higher as the battle for national ticket begins? Agoro Sare face Kisumu Day today from 2 p.m. and all eyes on defending champions as games starts. This is all about high school games and volleyball and basketball. Let's take a look at page 31. It's time to gather round plot for success in Kitui ties. Now, boys and girls volleyball champions Tumaini and Kwatanze set to defend titles. New champions to be crowned in football following the elimination of last year's winners. That story is comprehensively covered for you on page 31. On the cover page of the Standard this morning, key battles as England face Dutch test in semis. 3 Lions will be seeking to reach their first ever major tournament final on foreign soil tonight. Netherlands are in the semis despite finishing third in Group D behind France and Austria. Now, with that story of Euro 2024, we take a quick break here on the Morning Momentum. See you on the other side of this broadcast with more stories making the headlines on the Daily Nation.
Je, wewe ni mfanyabiashara katika sekta ya elimu, afya bora, usafiri ama unamiliki kampuni yoyote ile? Ungependa kupata fursa ya kutangaza biashara yako ili kuwafikia wateja zaidi? Usikonde. Runinga ya Younib inakupa fursa ya kupeperusha matangazo kuhusu bidhaa na huduma unazotoa kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari za simu 0750344700 ama kupitia barua pepe marketing@younibtv.com. Jinyakulie leo. Younib TV, ever the best.
Ever the best. Hallelujah.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining the conversation, you are rolling with the host with the most. Alfonsoh is my name. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation. A Ruto Raila government. President William Ruto and ODM chief Raila Odinga may be planning to form a government of national unity as the head of state seeks a way out of the current youth-led protests. Meanwhile, the Azimio coalition faces implosion. That story is beefed up for you on page 4, 5, and 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 7. Groundwork laid for appointment of a new look at IEBC. President William Ruto yesterday appended his signature to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Bill 2024, effectively making it law and setting the stage for reconstitution of the polls agency that has been operating without commissioners. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. On page 2, they left me for dead, says abducted student. When Kenya School of Law President Joshua Okai was thrown out of the boot of a moving vehicle, he found himself lying by Maragua River in Murang'a County, too weak to move. That story is also covered for you on page 2. Scandal. No projects to show for 1 trillion shilling loans. The government cannot show projects funded with 1.13 trillion of expensive loans it borrowed in 11.5 years to 2021. That story is comprehensively covered for you on the cover page of the Standard this morning. Let's get up close and candid and take a look at page 2. My kidnappers left me for dead. Kenya School of Law President Joshua Okai was abducted by unknown people on Wednesday, June 26th. They strangled him and beat him on his chest, legs, and ankles. The torture went on intermittently, but questions were always the same. You want to catch up with that story on page 2 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 3, how forged DNA papers helped a man dodge paying child support. Suit puts into question the number of cases that could have been tilted through underhand tactics. First court-ordered test was positive and the second negative. Someone plucked out the original Camry results. That story is beefed up for you on page 3 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 4. Inside Ruto-Raila handshake deal that split Azimio. Dr. Ruto is said to have dangled at least 3 cabinet slots to ODM, among other key positions in government, but the move has triggered a flurry of protests from some leading members of Azimio. President calls for a broad-based political arrangement, maybe a precursor to the formation of a government of national unity. You want to catch up with that story on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 6, dialogue. Keep off Gen Zs tell Raila. Ruto announces 6-day talks involving 150 members to begin on Monday. Youth accuse opposition chief of siding with oppressors, warning they won't allow political class to hijack their cause. That story is beefed up for you on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 7, groundwork laid for appointment of new look IEBC as Ruto ascends to bill. New law lays ground for hiring of panel that will be tasked with recruiting new commissioners. Nominating bodies that will constitute the selection panel are expected to forward names to the president. That story is covered for you on page 7. And the timeline, what happens next? The timelines on the constitution of the selection panel will, however, only kick off after the new bill has been gazetted and becomes law, which should happen within 7 days. The various nominating bodies that will constitute the selection panel are now expected to forward names to the president through parliamentary service commission within 14 days. Let's take a look at page 8. Evidence recovered from Obado, his son tabled as case starts. Ex-governor accused of graft and conflict of interest. EACC conducted raids on Obado's and his son's houses. And that story is beefed up for you on page 8. Let's take a look at page 10. Kenyan officers in Haiti upbeat about success of peace mission. They are working closely with the Haitian government, local and international partners. Mission head has outlined mandate as including supporting efforts to create conditions conducive for elections. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Let's take a look at expert opinion, what a forensic audit of public debt really entails. Now, forensic audit is mainly applied in situations where fraud is suspected and seeks to answer specific questions. Those are sentiments by Hosea Njoroge. Let's move on and take a look at more stories here on the Standard. On page 15, you have an article here on chess, and it's all about who are this year's winners. They are trailblazers who are defying norms and redefining success. That is all about top 40 under 40 women. That article is beefed up for you inside the Standard, the Daily Nation this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the international scene. Fresh onslaught in Gaza could derail peace talks, says Hamas. Israeli tanks pressed into the heart of Gaza City and ordered residents out after air raids. Air strikes and artillery barrages heaviest in 9 months of conflict, locals claim. That story is beefed up for you on page 18. Briefly, in Khartoum, Sudan keen on success of Jeddah negotiations. Now, Sudan's Transitional Sovereign Council chairman, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, on Monday stressed the keenness to make the Jeddah negotiating platform a success. Al-Burhan made the remarks while receiving a Saudi Arabia Deputy Foreign Minister, Walid bin Abdulka. In Tunis, endorsement race for presidential candidates begins. Tunisia's electoral agency has announced the start of the race for endorsements of presidential candidates. Tunis Afrique Press reported. Forms will be published on the agency's website, and the candidate can distribute it to voters to obtain the required number of endorsements. In Washington, Biden vows to stay put in fight for second term. In a letter to Democratic lawmakers on Monday, U.S. President Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, has vowed to stay in the race. In Arusha, Tanzania, experts urge EAC to adopt Kiswahili as official language. Experts on Sunday renewed their calls for East African community ministers to expedite amendments to EAC treaty to adopt Kiswahili as the official language. That story is briefed up for you on page 18 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at the business world. DRC now Kenya's fastest growing EAC export front. Reduction of duty on wheat helps to boost trade. Great Lakes country overtakes Uganda. Frosty diplomatic ties notwithstanding. That story is comprehensively beefed up for you on page 20 of the Standard this morning. In matters real estate, Lap Trust Asset Fund sells 605 million shares. In telco, Safaricom pips Airtel as largest 5G sites owner. Now, Safaricom is for the first time operating more fifth-generation 5G sites than its rival Airtel Kenya, underlining an aggressive rollout that points to intensifying competition between the two telcos for the fast-growing data business. In matters finance, capital gains tax collections hit 8.38 billion shillings. Taxes collected from financial deals, including the sale of land, houses, and shares in privately held firms, grew by nearly 50% to a record 8.38 billion shillings. Now, let's move on swiftly and take a look at sports news on the Daily Nation this morning. And we start with secondary school games. Giants on high alert as regional action begins. Agoro Sare and Kisumu Day to face off. Teams battle for bragging rights slots to next month's national games in Kisii County. On page 30, just what makes this Kenya Sevens team tick? Now, Shujaa in tough pool that also contains Argentina, Australia, and Samoa. Squad is made of young players with an average age of 24 who are disciplined, hungry, and willing to learn. On page 31, little to separate England and Netherlands in today's semis. Now, few flashes of their best quality tonight might be enough for either side to make the final. Dutch have edge in attack with the tournament joint to top scorer Gakpo, while the English defense has been pretty solid thus far. That story is beefed up for you on page 31. On the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning, no projects to show for 1 trillion expensive loans. Now, National Treasury borrowed money before getting AG's opinion. Special audit was carried out on loans taken between July 2010 and December 2021. Let's dig a little into that now. The government cannot show projects funded with 1.13 trillion of expensive loans it borrowed in 11.5 years to 2021, even as an audit reveals huge risks since the credit facilities were taken illegally. The National Treasury took 13 expensive syndicated loans and sovereign bonds, which the Auditor General in a special audit, utilization of commercial loans in Kenya between July 2010 and December 2021, reveals were used to settle recurrent expenditures in government contrary to the law. Now, with that story of no project to show for 1 trillion expensive loans, we come to today's end of the morning momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV and particularly the morning momentum right here on the best youth television network in East and Central Africa. By extension, all gratitude goes to those who made this broadcast a success. Behind the lens, Raphael Wangila, and the Chief Controller, Anifa Kavira. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. I have been your host, Alfonsoh. Until then, do have a beautiful Wednesday.